In everyday language, we often understand communication to mean speaking. There's a whole lot more to communication, from interpreting the speaker's clothing and posture, to their movements, facial expressions, and to their gestures. These are all essential parts of communication, as are the context of the encounter and even the shared experiences of those persons conversing with each other. Communication is therefore much more than just speaking. Rather, communication is the exchange of signals or of symbols. In addition to speaking, we are constantly sending and receiving signals in the form of body language, clothing style, volume, tone of voice, and much more. And the craziest thing, we don't even have to consciously do anything or intend to communicate. Communication occurs even without intention or conscious intervention. Even without us wanting to communicate, we are read by others, so to speak. That's why Watzlawik, the communication psychologist, said, "You cannot not communicate." We are mostly little aware of both our own culture and our communication. Communication studies is actually a whole separate topic and discipline. This video can possibly not cover everything in terms of content, but we will address some relevant points from it that are important for intercultural communication and refer to a few useful theories at the end. You can find more detailed information in the linked videos below and suitable exercises in your own online course and face-to-face seminar. We will look at the following basic models of communication in this video. The sender and receiver model, which will show us the circular and dynamic character of communication. The 4 sides model, which will show us the risks of misunderstandings. The 5 axioms, which will broaden our basic knowledge of communication. The values and development square, which we can use to help reduce strangeness and create resonance, an example to improve our relationship and learn interculturally. The inner team, which gives us instructions on how we can clarify difficult situations and encounters systematically and from multiple perspectives. Communication is the exchange of signals, and there is no need for intention. When the speaker, let's call her Jane, says something to the listener, let's call him Jake, she does it in a certain way. She chooses certain words and pauses in a speech a certain volume and emphasis and shows a certain body language. We could say she encodes her message. Jane's counterpart, Jake, must first decode what has been said. An example, think about what the message is meant to be. So Jake interprets Jane's message, and based on the interpretation, he will answer her. And his answer also requires certain words and pauses in speech, a certain volume and intonation, as well as body language. In this sender and receiver model, it becomes clear that the process of communication is always a circular and a dynamic process, and also that an intention is not required for communication. Friedemann Schulz von Thun is the communication psychologist that students cannot ignore when studying social work, communication, or psychology. He developed the famous 4-eared listener, which is another name for the 4-sided model. He developed the values and development square and the inner team. Briefly explained, the 4 sides model means that a message can be sent and received on at least 4 different levels. The most famous example involves a situation in which a car where a woman is driving and her partner sitting in the passenger seat says, "The traffic light is green." On a factual level, this initially seems to be a simple observation that the traffic light is green. However, on the appeal level, this could mean that she should please drive. On a relationship level, this may mean that he thinks he is the better driver. And on a self-revelation level, he may be saying that his train leaves in 10 minutes and he is in real hurry. This model can, of course, also be applied to intercultural situations where misunderstandings due to misattributions tend to occur more frequently. At this point, I would also like to point out the book Intercultural Communication by Dagmar Kumbier and Friedemann Schulz von Thun, in which several examples of the four-level, four-sided model can be found. The links can be found below. We have already heard the first of Paul Watzlawik's 5 axioms, the basic assumptions. First, you cannot not communicate. The second says, every communication has a content and a relationship aspect, as we also saw with Friedemann Schulz von Thun. Third, communication is always cause and effect. So it runs circular. And the fourth is, human communication uses analog and digital modalities, which here means, because the axioms were developed before digitalization, the information and relationship level. The fifth and final axiom states that communication is symmetrical or complementary. This deals with the aspects of power or the striving for the balance between speakers. Every person is unique, and against this background it is clear that people, even twins, are always different. One person may think of the other that she lives very fragilely and economically, while she thinks, for example, of him as being very generous and very welcoming. This is a mutual positive perception at the upper level and should be the goal of interpersonal intercultural encounters. A positive mutual perception. In the event of a dispute or conflict, an example in the event of estrangement, he will then perceive her as stingy, and she will perceive him as extravagant, lavish, or even wasteful. Every value also has an anti-value, and every value has an exaggeration. Interpersonal and intercultural learning means that we try to gradually reduce otherness and strangeness and gradually build up understanding. Let's move on to the final model, the so-called inner team. The inner team provides a kind of instruction for self-help. Similar to Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of nonviolent communication, who formulated a clarification of one's own needs as a prerequisite for successful communication, Friedemann Schulz von Thun would like to use this model to help us to clarify ourselves. In intercultural encounters and generally complex communication, we're often torn internally, and often have contradictory thoughts and solutions to a situation. Let's say different voices. So we have different voices inside ourselves. Each of these different voices has a good intention behind it. In this model, each voice is seen as an independent person who enters into negotiations with the other independent persons. It is useful to give team members names that describe their characteristics. So when making a decision, it might be about a possible deal with a Chinese partner company to increase capacity. The success-oriented person might say that we need the production capacity because we can meet so much more demand that way. The far-sighted person doesn't want to get the very best price, but rather places more value on a long-term business relationship with a Chinese partner company. The cautious person warns against cooperation because this would mean that the know-how would be passed on to a possible competitor, and the fearful person warns against overtaxing their own company. By examining different intentions and their arguments, people are able to achieve self-reflection and clarification where, in example, certain worries or motivations come from. Let me summarize. We looked at the transmitter and receiver model, or the sender and receiver model for circularity and dynamics. The 4-page model for the different levels. The 5 axioms, we had a look at the values and development square for improving relationships, and we had a look at the inner team for improved decision making. The topics discussed here form part of a basic foundational understanding of communication. The following tasks and topics will make your online course or a seminar more intercultural. We will deal with various problems that arise in communication across cultures in the form of case studies and training videos. These problems arise at different points. We tend to speak more directly or indirectly, depending on the context of the respective culture. Our communication styles, they differ. While in some cultures people like to gesticulate expressively, and people often physically touch or interrupt each other in conversations, in other cultures it is more common to speak reservedly and neutrally and under no circumstances touch or interrupt each other. Gestures and body language in particular often differ. Even if we cannot possibly cover all the different body language signs in the world here, dealing with gesture language is still very suitable for raising awareness of possible misunderstandings. Finally, there needs to be a common and shared background of knowledge between partners in communication in order to be able to correctly interpret each other's person's messages or signals. You can find all this in the links in the appendix, in your online course or your face-to-face seminar. While I'm speaking to you in German gesture language, now maybe like this. So if someone asked me, I would do the very same thing in Persian a little differently. My invitation to you remains the same. Come closer and find lots of more exciting information. My hope is that you will encounter many moments that make you go, aha. The video on attribution theory and the cultural dimension of low and high context are also related to this topic. On YouTube, I encourage you to leave your remarks in the comments and to like and to subscribe. Thank you for your valued cooperation and feedback on the seminar and the online learning platforms.